All right, hello, youth. It's the dead of summer here, the beginning of August. Ant crawling on my screen, and so I may be swatting some mosquitoes here as I try to shoot this next video about Genesis chapter 44. I'm a little bit different vantage point here in the backyard to help with mosquitoes a little bit and with the lighting. And also I found this, which we always have in our backyard this time of year. It's the flower from a vine that just comes up by itself, and I always leave a few. I don't mow them down, and they make a little green fruit and then make seeds. But what a flower, right? Maybe some of you have seen this flower before, but doesn't that look like something out of the tropics, right? Or from another planet. Beautiful. It doesn't smell that great. I kind of like it, but a lot of people think it smells stinky. This is called a passion flower. Passion flower. And I'm going to tell you what I remember about it, because I just now found one. So I didn't do any research, but I think that what I've heard is that when Jesuit missionaries came over to this country centuries ago, and they saw this flower, it made them think of the Passion of the Christ. The Passion of the Christ. Maybe you've heard of that movie, or maybe you've heard someone talk about Passion Week that culminates in Easter. So I think that is why this is called the passion flower. It's named after the Passion of Christ. It has 3 doohickeys on the top there, 3, and they look like nails. Okay, the very top ones, you can see there's just 3 of those, and they look kind of like old-fashioned nails. So what I've heard, again, is that that reminded the priests of the 3 nails that were used to nail Jesus to the cross, right? He had 2 holding his hands up, but just 1 was needed to go through both feet into the bottom. So he had 3 nails. Underneath those 3, you can see there's 5 doohickeys. There's also a pattern of 5 underneath twice. There's 5 green things and then 5 kind of bluish lavender things. So there's a lot of 5s on this flower, and that supposedly reminded them of the 5 wounds of Christ. The 5 wounds. So obviously there's 3 wounds where the nails went in, so where's the 2 others? Well, there was a crown of thorns that was placed on his head, so he had a head wound, and then just after he died, you may remember the soldier stuck a spear in his side to make sure he was really dead, and water and blood came out. So historically, there's been 5 wounds, and if I remember right, these 5 other doohickeys that turn up in different places remind of that. And this frill is supposed to remind us of the crown of thorns that was placed on his head. So you can see that all the different little beautiful parts of this flower have been given some sort of association with the crucifixion. So why is it called passion flower, right? Well, the reason we say the Passion of the Christ or Passion Week, I hate to throw this away, so I'll just set it down. Maybe I'll give it to my daughter after I'm done. Again, I think I got this right. We use the word passion in conjunction with those events, with the crucifixion especially, is because Christ demonstrated how much he loved us, or the passion he had for his people, by being willing to suffer all of that. 3 nails, 5 wounds, crown of thorns, for us. Okay? So we don't use passion in that way very much anymore. we just say somebody's really into something, right? They're obsessed with it or something. They have a passion. But I think that's why we use the word passion, and that's why this flower is called passion flower. Does that have anything to do with what we're going to read tonight? Well, maybe. So you see what you think when we get to the end, okay? I'm going to read Genesis chapter 44. I think I'll read it, then I'll pray, and then we'll talk briefly about it. And this time I will be brief because I think the mosquitoes are going to get me here. So, Genesis chapter 44. The story thus far, as you will recall, Joseph, the 11th of 12 brothers, Joseph, was sold into slavery by his 10 jealous older brothers. And his father thinks that he's been killed, so he's given him up for lost. But he wasn't killed. He was simply taken to another country, to Egypt. There he had many adventures. He was in prison for a while, but eventually, through God's divine intervention, Joseph rises to become practically the most powerful man in Egypt. Only Pharaoh is above him, and Pharaoh trusts Joseph with everything. So Joseph has this incredible rise, and because Egypt is the most powerful nation on earth at this time, Joseph becomes the most powerful man in the world. Okay, so then his brothers, because of a famine, come to Egypt years and years later to buy food, because they've heard Egypt has food, and they have to come before Joseph. And Joseph knows them, he recognizes them, but they don't recognize their younger brother, who is now the most powerful man in the world. And Joseph begins sort of messing with them to see, well, I'm not sure. You decide why he's messing with them, but he begins to mess with them a little bit. And one of the things he does is he wants to get his younger brother down to Egypt. So he keeps one of the brothers hostage, Simeon, and lets the other brothers go and tells them to bring Benjamin back. And if he can meet Benjamin, then all will be well, and he'll release Simeon, and he'll sell them food, and they won't die of starvation. So their father doesn't want to do this because Benjamin is his new favorite son, and but finally relents because he's scared they're going to all starve to death. So he sends Benjamin with him, and they go back to Egypt. And sure enough, Joseph releases Simeon back to them and has a big party at his house, a big feast with his all 11 of his brothers, the 10 older ones that sold him into slavery, and his younger brother, Benjamin. So they're all here in Joseph's house. He sort of has them in his power. The last thing we read is that they were having a grand time. But Joseph has one more twist in store for them. Okay? So, chapter 44 of Genesis. He, that is Joseph, commanded the steward of his house, saying, "Fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack." So he's done this before. He's going to put their money back in their sacks, refund their money to them without them knowing it. Also, verse 2, "Put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, and his grain money." So the steward did according to the word that Joseph had spoken. As soon as the morning dawned, the men were sent away, they and their donkeys. So they all unknowingly have their money again, and Benjamin, buried in his sack of grain, is Joseph's special silver cup. Verse 4, "When they had gone out of the city and were not yet far off, Joseph said to his steward, 'Get up, follow the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, Why have you repaid evil for good? Is this not the one from which my Lord drinks, that is the cup, and with which he indeed practices divination? You have done evil in so doing.'" In other words, Joseph says, go tell them that I use this cup to tell the future, right? That's how I know so much about them, and that's how I was able to prepare for this famine. I use this magic cup to help me see things that others cannot. And you've not only stolen my cup, you've stolen my special magic cup. Okay. Verse 6, so he overtook them and spoke to them these same words. So he did. He caught up to the brothers and accused them of stealing the cup. They said to him, why does my Lord say these words? Far be it from us that your servants should do such a thing. Look, we brought back to you from the land of Canaan the money which we found in the mouth of our sacks. How then could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? They're saying if we're thieves, then we wouldn't have brought back the money that we found in our sacks last time. We would have kept it, right? But we brought it back. So how can you accuse us of stealing from the guy's house that gave us a feast? Doesn't make sense. Then verse 9, they shoot their mouths off a little too far here. With whomever of your servants it is found, let him die, and we also will be my Lord's slaves. So they say, fine. If one of us have it, then we'll all be your slaves, and whoever actually has it, you can kill him. How's that? Verse 10, he, that is the steward, said, now let it also be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be my slave, and you shall be blameless. So he says, okay, kind of. I'm gonna back it off a little bit. Instead, what we're going to do is we're not going to kill anybody. Whoever has the cup, they'll have to be a slave, and the rest of you can go free. Verse 11, then each man speedily let down his sack to the ground, and each opened his sack. So he searched. He began with the oldest and left off with the youngest. So he saved it till the very last. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Benjamin is the youngest. Well, then they tore their clothes, and each man loaded his donkey and returned to the city. So they didn't say, you'll notice they did not say, well, Benjamin, sorry, looks like you're it. We're out of here. See ya. No, they all tore their clothes. They said, and they said, oh, well, we're all in this together, and they all went back to the city. Verse 14, so Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and he was still there, and they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said to them, what deed is this you have done? Did you not know that such a man as I can certainly practice divination? In other words, Joseph says, don't you know I can see wherever my magic cup is? I knew you'd stolen it. How do you can't get it away with anything. Then we get to verse 16. And you know what? I think I'll stop and pray right here because I've already started to comment. And it's interesting. Verse 16 to the end is just Judah talking. So I think I need to stop interrupting him and let him talk. So let's pray real quick and ask God to be with us. Lord, you do hold the future in your hand, and you are pleased from time to time to let your people know what the future holds. And we thank you and praise you that for those upon whom you have set your favor, that heaven awaits through the finished work of your Son, in whose name we now ask that your Spirit would come among us and help us. Amen. All right. So we've got the setup, and the rest of the chapter, which is more than half the chapter here, is just Judah talking. Now you're already going to know some of this, but listen carefully to his words, and like we've talked about before, on these long recaps that are in the Bible, try to imagine that you're there, and maybe you're an official in Joseph's court. Maybe you're the steward, right? Try to imagine that you're the steward, and you see that your master has caught these guys or is trapping them or something, and now you're going to listen to Judah. What can Judah say? Right? What's going through his mind? So I'm just going to read straight through the end, 16 through 34. Well, I might stop. Then Judah said, What shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. Here we are, my Lord's slaves, both we and he also with whom the cup was found. Judah says, you got us. Right? Isn't that what he says? Are they actually guilty of this crime? No, they're not. Do you think he might actually be talking about something else? I'm not sure. Because he is guilty, they're all guilty of the crime against Joseph those many years before. All of them except Benjamin. Right? And Benjamin's the guy who actually has the cup. So everything's all twisted around. But it's interesting that this is how Judah starts. But he said, far be it from me that I should do so. The man in whose hand the cup was found, he shall be my slave. This is Joseph talking. And as for you, go up in peace to your father. So I made a mistake. Joseph still had one more thing to say. Joseph says, no, you don't have to all be my slaves. Just Benjamin. He's the guilty one. He'll stay and be my slave forever. You and your brothers, your other 9 brothers, you 10 older boys, you're free to go. You're innocent. Okay? You see what Joseph's doing? He's really ratcheting it up on them because Benjamin is the one brother who's innocent and the 10 are guilty of treating Joseph the way they did. So now the rest of it is Judah talking. Verse 18, then Judah came near to him and said, O my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's hearing, and do not let your anger burn against your servant, for you are even like Pharaoh. My Lord asks his servants, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age, who is young. His brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him. Remember, this is the very situation that they couldn't tolerate that led to them kidnapping and selling Joseph, is the obvious favoritism of Jacob towards the sons of Rachel. Okay. Verse 21, then you said to your servants, bring him down to me that I may set my eyes on him. And we said to my Lord, the lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. But you said to your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall see my face no more. So it was, when we went up to your servant my father, that we told him the words of my Lord. And our father said, go back and buy us a little food. But we said, we cannot go down. If our youngest brother is with us, then we will go down, for we may not see the man's face unless our younger brother is with us. Then your servant my father said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. And the one went out from me, and I said, surely he is torn to pieces, and I have not seen him since. But if you take this one also from me, and calamity befalls him, you shall bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave. Now therefore, when I come to your servant my father, and the lad is not with us, since his life is bound up in the lad's life, it will happen when he sees that the lad is not with us, that he will die. So your servants will bring down the gray hair of your servant our father with sorrow to the grave. They weren't worried about that when it was Joseph, right? They have a ticket to get out. They can go home. But Judah says, if we go back, we're not willing to go back because of it will kill our father. He'll be so sad. Okay. For your servant became surety for the lad to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father forever. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brothers. For how shall I go up to my father if the lad is not with me, lest perhaps I see the evil that would come upon my father? So Judah says, I became surety. He said, I became the guarantee, and I want to swap places, even though Benjamin has the cup. Please let me swap places with him. Let me bear his punishment and let him go free for the sake of the love of my Father. Okay? Let me say that again. What Judah's saying is, my Father loves this boy more than me. Okay? And so I am willing to trade places with him, even though he's guilty and I'm not, so that he can go back to my Father. Okay? That's at least what Judah's saying. Judah may indeed be putting this all together and realizing that he was guilty the whole time, and Joseph never should have been sold into slavery, and that this may all be happening through some divine plan. But that's the end of the chapter, by the way. If you're curious what Joseph's response is, you can look ahead. But, I looked and looked at this chapter. I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on here. And, there's a lot of symbols here when we think about Christ coming from his Father, descending to earth to rescue us, to swap out. But I can't quite make it fit, because every time I start to put the pictures together of Judah being willing and Benjamin being innocent, it doesn't quite match up with what Jesus did, because Jesus truly was innocent, came willingly for you and I. We truly deserved slavery and death, and Jesus accomplished the transfer and took our punishment so that we could go free. But to some extent, Judah, the ancestor of Jesus, now seems willing to sort of do this, right, for his younger brother. If nothing else, for the love of the Father. Okay? So I'll let you think about how and if that all fits together, and if what all is being symbolized here, or what's actually happening. What about the flour? Well, what about this cup? When they were opening those sacks, one thing you did not want is that cup. Whoever had the cup was it, right? Slavery. If you didn't have the cup, free to go. Okay? Whoever had the cup would have to pay the penalty. And that made me, of course, think of Matthew chapter 26, which we'll close with this. Which does tie in with our passion flower here. Matthew chapter 26, verse 39. He, that is Jesus, went a little farther and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but you will. In verse 42, again, a second time, he went away and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done. That was another cup that no one wanted. The cup of God's wrath poured out justly on sin. The only human being that didn't deserve to drink that cup that's ever lived is Jesus Christ. And yet, there it was. It was presented to him. It was in his sack. And he didn't want it, but he willingly drank it. Okay? He took the penalty, which was the wrath of God, borne out on the cross, borne out in separation from his Father, so that you and I wouldn't have to be separated from the Father. And he did that out of his passion for us. So, maybe there's some connection there with cups. All right. That's all I got. They're eating me alive out here. I'll go give this to Ren and give you one last look at it there before it starts to wilt. And next time, we'll find out what Joseph's response to Judah's speech is. See you then. Bye-bye.